I've got a couple who right now is just getting their third house. They bought one Airbnb first, and they bought a second co-living. Now they're buying their third home, which is going to be a co-living home. They're just getting married, and they're living in the upstairs, and they're renting 4 rooms out on the downstairs. And so that's a really cool strategy for house hacking, right? In a way that this couple is taking what normally would be a couple's biggest expense and making it free.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast. We talk about time freedom. We talk about living big lives, doing what you want, traveling where you want, being there for your family, getting free. And the vehicle is Cashflow Real Estate. We're not flippers. We're not land developers. We're not a lot of things. We are all about buying awesome real estate, cash flowing it, and using that cash flow to get free. And so on this podcast, we interview awesome entrepreneurs. Today we have Sam Wegert, and Sam's a badass. Like, he's the co-living guy and providing people with affordable housing that is clean, quiet, and safe. Because of co-living, he was able to retire him and his wife at 23 years old, which is crazy. Together, they own 8 short-term rentals, 150 plus co-living doors. Sam is now transitioning into a passive role in his business, focused on coaching and helping other people achieve financial freedom through co-living. So, yeah, man, thank you. Thanks for jumping on, man. I gotta say, we haven't had anybody in the co-living space. And so when I saw you diving in, I was like, okay, this is gonna be fun to unpack.
Yeah, dude. Thanks so much for having me on, man. It's just an honor. It's a privilege. And we should probably update that bio a little bit because it says I'm passive, but we are in, I think that's passive is like always passive-ish, right? I think David Green was the one who said that to me first. He was like, Sam, passive is a myth, man. He's like, there's only such a thing as passive-ish. And he's like, if you're ever truly just passive, you better watch out because shit's going to hit the fan soon. If you're not like looking at it. And so he was, so I'm a big fan of like looking at things, but we're actually in a big scale mode right now. And so I'm much more involved. I think when that bio was written was probably a few years ago when I was taking some time off and traveling. I am much more involved right now. We're actually building some co-living buildings from the ground up. I'm involved in that. We are launching a property management company that manages co-living buildings. And then we're just continuing to acquire and coach people. And we just recently launched a service where we take an investor who might be all the way across on the other side of the United States. And we do this done for you. We call it the white glove service, this done for you service where we buy and we rehab and then we manage all co-living to get that extra cash flow and to help solve affordable housing. So I wanted to make that quick tweak to that bio, but yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. It's been a crazy journey and looking forward to diving into it today.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like, I mean, if you take your eye off the ball too much, we can get really passive where you're like today we're like an hour a week in our real estate business, but we still put an hour a week in or so. Right. Obviously more than an hour if we're negotiating deals or whatever. But like, you also got to hold people accountable because like truly passive, you're gonna have things fall apart. So I love that. I think that's so true. So I want to start out by like just asking, what is co-living? Define co-living for me, and then I want to like dive back to how you even started in this game.
Yeah, co-living is really a simple strategy where instead of renting the whole house to a single family, you rent it by the room, and you have people stay in those rooms. It's usually it's a single person per room, so single occupancy per room, and the average clientele that's going to rent one of these rooms is probably between 18 and 35. They are single, no kids, or they're long distance, and then we're also seeing a population like 60 years old and older that are on a fixed income. Maybe their wife passed away. Maybe they got divorced. Maybe they never got married and they just need a place to stay. Right. And, in a lot of major cities, someone that makes less than $50,000 per year or even less than $60,000 per year in some cases just can't afford what a studio apartment plus utilities plus fees and all of that is going for in that city. And so they've got to look for alternatives. So co-living is really this strategy that introduces to any market a new price point that previously did not exist. Because normally in any city, studio apartment is the lowest you go. Co-living comes in as a concept and says, well, actually, no, you can go lower than that. You can go about 50% lower than what a studio apartment is. And that's a room for rent on the market, managed professionally, rented professionally, not just someone house hacking, but actually a strategy that someone has used, like my wife and I have, to have hundreds of units and to help solve this affordable housing and give people other options. So I could go on and on and on, but that's in essence what co-living is. And a lot of times you're taking these homes and you're using any extra space for additional rooms, right? If there's an extra living room downstairs or there's a bonus room, you're saying, hey, as long as I have a kitchen and a common area for everybody to commune and eat and do their thing, like the rest of the house should just be bedrooms. And that's kind of the philosophy.
I love this because like the only time I've heard of this, and this is I'm not versed in co-living, so I'll just say that out loud. Like I'm a mobile home park guy, so this is like I know about it, but I don't see it as a strategy. But I'm sure after this call, I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. So like the thing that I think about is like college, like homes next to colleges. That's what I think about, and I think that's where it's been like adopted, or maybe that's where people's brain goes. Because like, like I sold this house years ago when I was selling real estate to this guy, and he's like, well, I'm just going to rent it to a bunch of college kids at $400 or $500 a room. But to take this on more of like an affordable housing approach, I think is really, really interesting. Right. That's a really, in it, like you said, it's like you're hitting underneath that one bedroom or even below the studio. This is super interesting. So with the co-living, I'm sure there's certain things you're looking for when you buy this house. Like, is the kitchen big enough? And do you have like, is there a common room where 6 people can hang out comfortably? Or is it like what does that look like for like layout and strategy goes?
Yeah. First, it's good questions, man. I can tell your brain is kind of thinking about it. I will address the college thing. Like, college housing is really a beast in and of itself. Right. And I think that's important because these, a lot of college kids are going to sign 9-month leases because they're going to go back home during the summer, or they're going to, or they're going to sign a 12-month lease, but it's going to kind of be, or they're going to sign a 9-month lease, but it's going to be amortized over 12 months or something like that. A lot of times they don't have income themselves. Their parents are signing, or they're getting loans for this. And so that's not really what we do. That's not really the model that I advocate as much. I mean, there are whole companies that they know the college niche. They have the relationships with the colleges. Sure. They're approved as an off-campus provider even. There's a lot of that going around. And I would say out of the 350 members we have, or tenants we have, depending on what you want to call them, I'd say probably we have 5 college students, maybe 6. So it's not a huge piece of our population. It is exactly what you're saying, Mitchell. It is a way to solve affordable housing. I'll even give this little quick anecdote. When my episode first came out on Bigger Pockets, I was on Bigger Pockets about 2 years ago, episode 560, talking about co-living and this model. I had someone listen to that episode from Germany. He lives in Berlin, Germany, and he calls me up and he goes, Sam, I got to make a little bit of fun of you. I got to kind of like tease you a little bit. He goes, because you say that this is like a new thing, like, oh, this room rental thing, it's so new. He goes, man, I live in Berlin. He's like, we have whole building codes to regulate co-living. He's like, nobody rents an apartment here. We all rent rooms. We share housing. It's the shared economy. And he kind of teased me and he made fun of me. And he said this phrase. He goes, Sam, in Europe, a lot of kids, kids in the age group you're talking about, 18 to 35, he goes, they think of the room as the new apartment. That's how we think about it here. And I've always believed that America is kind of like maybe 5 to 10 years economically behind Europe. They're a little like ahead of us. We're like, they kind of point to where we're going, I feel like sometimes. And so that's the direction we are headed. And that shared economy is kind of becoming more accepted here in the United States. United States is one of those areas where it's like, I want my house and my gun and my car, and you can't take any of them from me. But as things have gotten more expensive, and as incomes have not kept up with rising rents and rising housing costs in general, these other options have to come on the market, right? It's just, and entrepreneurs like myself have to step in and say, there's a gap to fill here. Is it easy? No, there's a lot of nuances to this model, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but I think that that's really an important thing. And I'll share one more kind of anecdote just so people can wrap their head around this before we dive into the details of it. When Uber first came out, I don't know if you remember when Uber first came out. I vaguely remember, but when it first came out, the reaction from the general public went something like this. Hold on. There's this new app and it's going to tell you to go to some undisclosed location. You're going to pick up a random stranger that has not been background checked. You're going to pick them up, drop them off on another location, not get mugged or killed along the way. And this is going to work. Like, I don't know if this is going to work. And of course, now we have Uber. Airbnb was the same way. When Airbnb came out, it was like, hold on, like you're going to rent your second home on the lake to earn a little extra income and they're not going to destroy it. Like, I don't know if that'll ever work. And so if someone's listening to this and thinking, Sam, like 6 people sharing a house, 7 people sharing, 8, 10 people sharing a house, like that'll never work. Well, it will, as long as these systems are in place. And like you asked, you're buying the homes with the right layouts and all of that. And so this is the shared economy coming to America, like it or not, right? And I think that's kind of the way that I want people to wrap their head around it, whoever's listening. But that being said, to answer your question directly, okay, what does a co-living house actually look like? Well, I'll tell you, it does not look like an HOA house. It looks like staying as far away from HOAs as possible. You just don't want to get in any of those weird confrontations. I've hired a lawyer. I've fought the HOAs. I usually do this survey whenever I'm with people or speaking live. I'll be like, how many of you live in an HOA or ever have lived in an HOA? And almost everybody raises their hand. How many of you enjoyed that experience? And it's like all hands go down but one, right? And they were like the president or on the board, or they fell in love somehow. But my point in saying that is we do no HOA houses. And then the number one thing we look for next is square footage. Like, how big is this house? Because if you're going to have people sharing the house, you want them to be able to spread out, right? You want to have bigger rooms, the better. You want to have extra private entrances where people can kind of feel like it's their home. You're looking for a home that's got square footage. If you're in an area that doesn't have good public transportation, you're looking for an area that has enough parking to really justify these people living. Or if you're close to a bus line, if you're close to a public transportation, then you don't need as much parking. But you probably need 2/3 the number of, in a city like Charlotte or a city like Houston where there's not good public transportation, you probably need 2/3 the number of parking spots as you do rooms in the home. And so really that's what you're looking for. And then from there, you're looking for as many bathrooms as possible. So, a lot of times we'll go into these homes, we'll add a full bathroom, or we'll take a half bathroom and we'll make it a full bathroom. But what you can do with, but if you find a home, like I found one the other day here in Charlotte that has 4 full bathrooms already. Beautiful. I don't have to add a single room because you want to keep at least a 3-to-1. So 3 bedrooms to 1 bathroom ratio. You don't ever want to go be above that. In a perfect world, 2-to-1, 2 bedrooms to 1 bathroom. I mean, in a perfect world, and that's why this is why a lot of us are looking into ground up development for co-living. You'd have a 1-to-1. Everybody would have a private suite, right? And they'd have their bathroom, and that would be great. And so that's kind of what you're looking for. But in a single family house that you're rehabbing for this model, you're probably gonna just try to do the best you can. No more than 3-to-1, 2-to-1's better. So if I have, the home I was looking at it's 4 full bathrooms. It's going to be 8 bedrooms. That's a 2-to-1 bedroom to bathroom ratio. That's a great ratio. I know I can rent that. I can do well. People will love that house. So those are a couple. And again, I could go on with a bunch more details, but those are really a couple. I mean, if you're looking at kind of just a general buy box, right? You want to be within a commute's distance to major employers that would employ people making $60,000 a year or less. Big Amazon warehouse center. Great. I want to be close to that. Airport is a huge one. You're close to an airport. I mean, everybody who's putting your bag on a plane is making $20 an hour, $22.50 an hour, right? So where are they living, right? They need a place to live. So pilots need a crash pad sometimes. They're in for 2 days of the week, 1 day of the week. They want to have a place that's theirs. So that's another option. And I could go on with this, but I'll kind of stop there for now. Those are some general big chunks of the buy box of co-living that everybody's going to want to look for.
This is so interesting. And I mean, you've got my ears, man. I think our listeners are going to love this because so I invest in mobile home parks mainly.
Yeah.
But my whole thesis around it is that housing's getting more expensive. Housing's not going to get cheaper. We've got a government that won't stop printing, right? They print the delta. They're devaluing the dollar.
That's right.
And we're in this situation where people can't afford an apartment. They can't afford to buy. They can't. So in other words, people are looking for options, and that force paired with, or the way that things are moving paired with the sharing economy, I think that's really interesting. Because what you said about Airbnb and Uber, I do remember that. I do remember thinking is this real? Is this, am I gonna get in the car with some guy or gal or what, or stay? And now we just do it like it's second nature. And so, I can see how the way that the economy is going, it's the tide is with you on this. And that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
And then the details on like the criteria for the house, that all makes a lot of sense. And honestly, if I think about it, like in my 20s, even like with my wife or single, like having this option would have been fine if it was presented to me, I think in the right way. I think that would be something that I would jump into.
I've got a couple. I know we've got a little delay here, but I've got a couple who right now is just getting their third house. They bought one Airbnb first, and they bought a second co-living. Now they're buying their third home, which is going to be a co-living home. And they're just getting married, and they're living in the upstairs, and they're renting 4 rooms out on the downstairs. And so that's a really cool strategy for house hacking, right? In a way that this couple is taking what normally would be a couple's biggest expense and making it a free, living for free, and eliminating it completely. And so that's a really cool strategy, kind of what you were just saying of like, man, I wish more people did this when they were kind of getting on their feet and rented out some rooms and shared. And a lot of people are house hacking. That's what I call house hacking, when you're living in it and sharing those spaces.
It's amazing. I mean, I think that it's and now today it's even more probably acceptable because, like you said, the sharing economy, it's moving that direction. And so I want to get back to this as well as where you are and what you're building. I want to talk about, because there's so many things I want to talk about, but I do want to go back in time to Sam before you owned anything. You know, maybe you're 20 years old or 18 years old, whenever you started. What was it that got you into real estate, and how did you get into those first properties to start playing this game?
Yeah, well, when I was 19 was when I think it was 19 or 20 when I closed on my first foreclosure. It was my first ever property. I was always a big saver. That was due to the fact that my dad, really instilled. My dad and my mom were both very frugal. Their parents lived through the Depression. And so they were frugal, and they passed that skill on to us for sure. And so just, the whole principle, and it's so underrated, man. And people were going to brush this off as just, so, it's easy to skip over what I'm about to say, but if you take every dollar that you make, and if you put 20 or 30, or I talked to someone the other day that said, I save 50% of every dollar I make. And I was like, holy cow, that's crazy. You have to live really lean in order to do that. But if you can do that, what a game. What a game. How much are you getting ahead? How much are you really winning if you can do that? And so if people would just do that and start with that, they'd kind of accelerate their process a little further than they would think. And so I started to do that early on in my life. I would work these construction jobs, and I would make $1,500, and I'd put aside $750. And this was when I was still living at home. And that was a really cool kind of journey for me, just to save money. So then my mom put me in martial arts when I was young. And so I was this awkward homeschooled kid, to a large extent, that my mom put me in martial arts for self-control, for discipline, for focus. And I kind of came out of that with some confidence. My martial arts instructor, he became like a second father figure to me. He really kind of just taught me life skills, not just kicking and punching and arm bars and chokeholds and joint locks, right? It was a lot of like life skills. And that's why I am just such a big promoter of martial arts. I went on to make a career out of martial arts. For the first 15 years of my life, I was a martial arts coach and a business owner. We grew 7, at the peak, we had 7, brick-and-mortar martial arts schools. We had an online program that spanned 25 different states. And I built that, and I scaled that. And I just recently, as of the last year, exited that company and just went full into building and coaching and teaching co-living real estate and financial freedom and cash flow. And so my journey was, like everybody who's listening, is always a little different than I thought it would be. I frankly thought I was going to be in the martial arts industry for the rest of my life, but the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, had different plans for me, and was kind of thrust into this. Now, I started investing in real estate when I was really young because that was just the right thing to do, and I didn't want a dollar. I had this obsession with retiring early. I retire by the time I'm 35. Just felt like if I could do that, then I was winning. And so I really, really, really did pursue that dream. And I just looked at all the other vehicles that people were using, like IRAs and 401ks. And I was like, well, that's hella too slow. That's 40, 50 years long. Like, I don't want to do that. So what's the fastest way? And the cash flow from this became the fastest way.
I love that. I share a lot of the same. I think my first property was around 19 or 20. I saved a lot of money early on. And I think that's a really good point because like if you can save a lot of money early on, especially early in your career before you have like kids or you have other things that cost you a lot of money, like you just kind of get ahead of that wave, you know, and it gives you opportunity to explore different things. I also had that desire like you. And I think that's really interesting, like to retire early. I also think it's interesting that you're still like passionately working. And so am I, because it's like once you can retire, I think you realize where it's like, I love this too much, man. There's too much to be done. And so you bought that first property. Like, I want to go back one more time, like, and you put people in it. Do you remember the cash flow on that first property? What was the first property like? What did it give you in your life?
Yeah, I'll kind of walk through like the first couple of homes and how the co-living idea popped. So my first property was a 3-bedroom, 3-bath condo in the town of Charlottesville, Virginia. And Charlottesville, Virginia is a big UVA. It's a University of Virginia's there. It's got one of the best business schools on the East Coast, Darden School of Business. And this building was actually built for college students. Now I wasn't in college, but I lived in one room. And I rented out the other 2 rooms. And I think at that point, I was probably renting out each room for like $575, $600 a month. And so I had bought, and believe it or not, it's going to sound crazy, but I was 20 years old. I had saved up the $67,000 that it cost me to buy that condo.
Wow.
So it was $67,000. I think they were asking $100 for it, but it was like a foreclosure and there was a lot of things. And so I just bought it cash. So I didn't have any. So I was making a little bit of money to live for free, because I had been able to do that. Now, this thing probably still would have, at rates back then, I don't remember exactly what rates were back in 2011, 2012, but I think it still probably would have broken even if I had to get a mortgage on it, which I didn't have to. But then in essence, what I did, man, is I went to, I moved. So that was that property. And honestly, I just did that because it just felt like the right thing to do. I didn't need the place. It just felt like the right thing to do. So then I moved from there to Charlotte, North Carolina. And again, I rented for like 6 months, and I moved there for work. I rented for like 6 months, and there was this house that came up for sale right across the street from where I was renting. And it was a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, kind of typical home, not really in a good area, right on a big 4-lane, busy, loud highway. But I bought it for $131,000. And I moved in, and honestly, I wasn't going to rent any rooms. I was just like, finally, like totally placed to myself. But I come from a big family of 8 kids. So I'm used to some commotion. I'm used to getting picked on. I'm used to there being a lot of people coming and going in the home. So I get into this house and I'm like, it's just too damn quiet. So I post on Craigslist at the time. I get a hit. This guy comes in, he moves in, he's from Mexico. Him and I hit it off. We're like best buds. We're talking girls. We're going out to eat. We're just like buds. And I'm like, this is cool. Like, let's do this again. So I rent out the other room. So I got me plus 2 other people. Now downstairs, there was this big L-shaped living room that we rarely used. We only used like 1/2 of it. So I put up a wall. I added a stand-up shower to the half bath. And now I've got 4 people living in here, or 4, including me. And one day I'm walking with one of my friends who was a vice president at SunTrust Bank at the time. He was at SunTrust, and then he moved over to Truist when Truist bought SunTrust. But anyway, my point in saying that is he asked me, he says, hey, how much are you renting that house for, Sam? And I did the math and I said, well, man, if I count myself as a renter, I'm renting this house for like $2,850, 4 people. And he said, man, that's kind of crazy because that house would normally at the time only rent for like $1,350. He goes, it's kind of crazy that you're doubling the rent. And Mitchell, I don't know what it was about the way he said that, but I thought, doubling the rent, like that's cool. And I went on this journey and I just said, well, it's working with 4 people. Could it work with 5? So I bought a house after 1 year, primary residence, 3.5%, 5% down, the whole shebang. Then I bought another house, 5% down. And every time I bought a house I could do 5 bedrooms with. The next one I bought a house I could do 6 bedrooms with. The next one I bought a house that I could do 7. Then I bought one that could 8 and then 9. And then the biggest I have is 10. I got 10 people sharing a house, right? Which might sound crazy to some people, but it didn't sound crazy to me because keep in mind, I've got 8 brothers and sisters and 2 parents and we had a 1,900 square foot house. Like that seemed normal to me. So that was kind of the journey of just buying these primary residences putting 5% down, getting the best interest rates. And then as soon as I was in that house for 1 year, I rented out the room I was living in, and that became pure investment. Went back to the exact same banker and said, hey, Mr. Banker, here's 6 or 8 leases, however many I had at the time. Here's 6, 7, 8 leases on that home. Add all that back into my DTI and give me a new loan for a new home. And I was working my full-time job this whole time. And so that was kind of the journey that I went on for this thing to get going in my brain.
This is so cool. And you hear a lot of these like newer investors that are getting in this game. A lot of times we'll look at the 1% rule, right? Where it's like, you got to hit 1% per month of the purchase price or whatever that is. And everyone's like, well, I can't, hit the 1% rule. And I'm telling you guys, Sam just told you how to hit it, not just hit it, but blow it out of the water. Cause I think this, and I also think like the definition of an entrepreneur is going into the marketplace, solving a real problem and benefiting from solving that. And like, I see this as fitting exactly into that. Like, you're like, look, I can provide more housing for more affordable, but provide a win to me personally, right? With this model, I think that it's, extremely interesting. So by 23 years old, you were like what you call retired. What did that look like? Like, how many houses did you have? And then like, where was your mindset? I guess you went on to build your martial arts, business, but like, what did that feel like? What was that cash flow? What did that look like? Maybe talk about that time in your life.
Yeah. So just for clarity, I've only been married for the last going on, I guess, 8 years. I got married when I was 20. My wife is downstairs. If I say this wrong, she's gonna yell at me. I think I got married when I was 20. 2018. Is that right? 6. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on this. I think I got married. So when I say retired at 23,
you got it, man. You got it.
At that point in my life, I didn't have a wife and kids. So being retired at 23 for me meant I was producing like, I think it was like $4,800 a month or something like that in passive income to me. And I think at that point I had my home in Charlotte and I might've had 2 homes here. Right. And with co-living, one of the beautiful things about this is you don't need a lot. Like I tell people all the time, if they choose the right co-living property, like 1 to 2 to 3, I mean, one amazing property can get you $2,000 to $3,000 a month of cash flow if you run it correctly. And if you're managing yourself, sometimes more, right? Because you're not paying a manager for that property. But when you start getting 2 to 3, if it's well run, if they're full and they're in the right areas, like even today on market deals, you can create financial freedom for most people, unless you're just living like a baller with 3 homes. It's crazy, right? Or at least get very close to that. So that's what it looked like for me and for my dad. My dad growing up, my dad really gave his life to really studying and being. He was a scholar, most of his life. And so he wasn't pursuing wealth, but my dad made, a lot of his life. He made $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. And so when I was making 50 or 60 passively, I was like, I'm making more than my dad and I don't have to work for it. And then in addition to that, I had some martial arts schools that I really was really just managing. I had one martial arts school in Virginia that I was just managing. I really wasn't like having to be a part of it actively. And so that was spitting off some additional cash flow. So for me, it was just like, I remember my journal entry. I was like, I'm retired. Like I'm going with my girlfriend at the time and we're going to travel around the United States. And I don't have to work and I don't ever have to come back. And it was just this really, really, really cool feeling. And that was kind of a combination of my martial arts schools and my properties at the time. But that's really what it looked like. It wasn't like I wasn't flying private jets. I wasn't spitting off 20K a month in cash flow. It was just like, hey, I'm making $50,000, $60,000 a year. That probably plus a little bit, plus some for my martial arts schools. And I was single and I was very frugal and I was living for free because I was living in one of my co-living homes. And that felt pretty good. Right. And that's kind of what financial freedom looked like for me at that time.
Well, I was just going to say, this matches our definition for financial freedom perfect, which we call R1. That's retirement one. That's the first, that's when you have enough cash flow to live and pay for your living expenses. It's not like you said, jet setting and you've got a Lamborghini in the yard and all of these things. We tend to feel like more important than that is like getting that time back. Cause really like when you have your time back, like if you think about from 23, I would imagine your life's really exploded because like when you have your time back, you're able to go do so many amazing things, whether that's like get in really good shape, or that's like travel with your loved ones, or be there for your loved ones, or build other businesses. Like that's where we're trying to get people's R1. So like, so I understand that. I mean, R1, you know, Gabe Hamill, my co-host, I think was at R1 at like $1,500 or something. Cause he's like, I was like living super cheap and we were scraping by, but he didn't have to work a job. And because of that, he could go find more deals. He could go create more value. He could go get in the best shape of his life, all those things. So anyway, I love that. And I do agree. It's like, I think that's the first domino, you know, to knock over.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot, Mitchell. I think we have a similar philosophy. It's like there's levels to financial freedom. And I do think that I remember I had someone come to me, my mentor at the time was like, hey, Sam, what would it take for you to be completely financially free? And at this time in my life, I just thought it was some crazy big number. So I threw out like $200,000 a month, like something insane. And he was like, and I was like 21 at the time. He was like, are you serious, Sam? He's like, go write down every single thing you can think of and put a dollar amount per month to it. And I couldn't get above like 30 grand at the time. Now trust me, I can get a lot higher now. But at the time, I was like, well, that house, the mountain house, the beach house, the condo in the city, the this. And I just couldn't think anything else at the time. And I was like $30K a month. And I was like, okay. So my point is, a lot of people don't get there because they make it so big. I teach these seminars now, these 5-day challenges that are these free events where I deep dive into what co-living is and how to do it. And I ask people on that challenge, I say, what's your financial freedom number? And they throw out the craziest things. They'll throw out lump sums, like 2 million, like 5 million, 20 million, 100 million. It's like, well, where are we getting this from? So I love that you guys are teaching people like there's a monthly number to this. And I think there's even a monthly number before you can support your current lifestyle. And I think it's when like you knew if you never earned another dollar in your life, you could pay for your bare necessities. Like you could eat, your health insurance, and your housing. Like not a single vacation, not a single meal out, but like you and your family would live. I call that the ramen noodle number. It's because it's like you're eating ramen noodles.
Oh, I like
and you
that.
aren't
I like that.
But it might be like you're saying, Mitchell, it might be like $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month. And like when you get to that level, that you should celebrate the hell out of that level, because that's like, whew, I lose my job tomorrow. My wife loses her job tomorrow. Everybody doesn't make a single dime, and we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're not going to be having fun. We're going to be going to the park instead of Disney World, but like, we going to be okay. And that's a cool number that I wish more investors on this journey would actually celebrate and define and get to. And sometimes that's 1 home, 2 home, if it's a high cash flowing asset. So it kind of helps people like get wins along the journey.
I'll tell you, if you can get to that ramen noodle number, and I like that, and you can contract your life enough to really get that time back, even at the ramen noodle number, then you're going to accelerate your life even faster than you would if you've got this huge R1 number, right?
Well said.
When I was 28 years old, I had a little girl, Evie. She was only about, I think she was 2 years old. I quit my job. My wife and I, we moved into a camping trailer. A lot of people know my story, but we moved into the camping trailer into a campground with basically people who were like just about homeless. And we were on the ramen noodle number. I think I had about $2,000 in cash flow, and the checks were coming to the KOA office. And I was like, I mean, my pipes were freezing, all this stuff. And I look back today, I'm like, it was so much fun. We had a ton of fun trying to survive and trying to figure it out. But I was like, I'm going to be an investor. I had no money. It was nuts. But I was at the ramen noodle number. And the other thing too that I learned was like, be careful with material and the addiction to material. You know, like our country, like I remember going to this guy's house in Los Angeles. He was like a friend of a friend. And it was like, he had a beautiful house. He had a beautiful pool in the back. He had a motorcycle in the garage. He had a sports car. He had all the things that you would think were amazing. And I was walking around his house. I'm like, oh man, when's the last time you took your car out? He's like, I haven't taken it out in 6 months. I'm like, oh, you guys must swim all the time. He's like, I never swim. And I'm like, well, what about like nothing that he had, he used. And I realized, and I later read something that really impacted me, but I realized like he was basically like driving to work for a job that he hated, right? Returning home to a family that barely knew him so he could buy shit that he doesn't use. And it was just this totally backwards way of thinking. And I was like, man, I got to get away from that. Like, yeah, like if I, today my rules, like if I'm going to buy material, it can't affect my lifestyle. Because you buy a car, now you got to work more. You buy what, so like I'm always careful about that. But you got to be careful really, really soon about that, because you can get yourself tied to these houses and these cars and the clothes and the whatever. And like, you're never going to live off your ramen noodle number. You're never going to hit your R1 number. You're never going to, if you're just addicted to material. So anyway, it sounds like you and I share a lot, because like, it's if you can make it not about the material and it's about the journey, I think that you can really get, go far. So anyway, so you're 23, you're financially independent, but you're only making couple thousand or 4,800, I guess, which is awesome. You built your martial arts. Like at some point you sold your martial arts business, right? Or closed it down, or what did that look like? And then like, what are you building today?
Yeah, man. And great question. I will answer that. I want to circle back around to what you said about just the material things. I think, I've definitely been guilty of using material things as status symbols, as symbols. The truth is, you're right. When I actually got the thing, I realized I didn't want the thing. I wanted the feeling that the thing was going to give me. And of course, like I usually thought like would give me a better feeling. It usually didn't, right? And of course, I'm not saying like having money is a really great thing in America, right? I was talking with a buddy the other day, and he said there's two types of people that live great in America. They're the bums, and they're the really wealthy people. He's like, in the middle, it sucks. He's like, that's where everybody gets squeezed. He's like, imagine it. This is actually my videographer who does my content for me. He was like, man, but think about it. He's like, if I was a bum and I just decided to be a bum, I'd go be homeless in Miami. I'd hunt iguanas because they're like an invasive species. I'd hunt the snake eye fish. He's like, and I would live great. He's a martial artist like me. He's like, I'd teach little karate lessons and it'd be amazing. So it actually, both him and I were like, let's try it for a week and see if we like it. So in October, we're doing the homeless challenge in Miami for a week. And we might come back with a totally different story. We might be like, nope, we thought it was cool in our minds, but it's not. But the idea is, you're exactly right. Like, it's nice to detach from all of that stuff sometimes, right? And I've got a buddy who, how I want people to think about it is like, if you have crazy, huge, big goals, you better and I mean like flying the jet. One of my goals is to buy the new Tesla Roadster as soon as it comes out. It's like $250,000. Like, if you have those big things, it just means you better like working a lot, because you are going to have to be more in the grind to get to that level, right? The people that are flying private, almost every single one, they've done their 30, their 40 years. But if you're just like, look, I don't really like working. I'd rather spend time with my family. I don't really like working. I'd rather do these things. Then yeah, you got to think about how big your goals are in comparison to how hard how much effort and time and energy you want to put into that. For example, I've got a buddy who lives in Mexico right now. He kind of went through this very existential crisis, got a divorce, lost his business, found himself in this small town in Mexico. I was talking with him the other day, and he goes, Sam, I only have, and he put it this way. He goes, I only have like enough money. And he hasn't worked in like the last 6 years. Like, he's just been living off of his savings and him selling his house in California. And he goes, I only think I have money for like 8 more years. And I was like, 8 more years? I was like, dude, wow. Like, you must have had way more money than I thought. Like, you told me what you sold your house for. Like, that's crazy. I said, how much, if you don't mind me asking, like, how much do you have? He goes, oh, I have 100K. And I was like, 100K? He was like, yeah, it cost me like 12 grand a year to live here, or something crazy like that. And I was just like, so yeah, you can live if you truly get creative. And I think this is kind of the point you were trying to make, Mitchell. Like, you guys truly get creative. If you really, like, you could probably be financially free at some level right now. Like, you might have to move to Mexico in a tiny little town on the coast that no one's ever heard of to get there. But like, just recognize that and define truly what you want. And I think that's really key.
What you just said was like, and for the listeners, listening in on this podcast, like, a lot of you, like Sam just said, could be financially free right now. Like, if you looked at the assets that you have, the house, the car, the whatever, and you turn that into cash flow, whether it's in our country, you tighten the belt in our country, or you leave our country. I mean, we went to Spain last year for a month, and I remember like talking to this lady, and she goes, we sold our house in Texas. We cashed out like $500,000, And she goes, and I live like a king here in this town. I can't remember it was like Sevier, I think, for like 4,000 to 5,000 a month. Like, and she's like, but we are in the penthouse. We're on top.
Yeah.
We're eating out all the time. She's like, you could do it for $3,000 a month easily. And she had kids too. And so I'm like, well, so anyway, I think that that's so true. And I think that, like, I don't know, why not question that? Why not look at that? Why not calculate that? Why not, if time is your thing, right? If material is your thing, like you said, maybe you need to go figure that out and you need to spend more time building a business or whatever that looks like. So, okay, well, I'll let you answer that original question there.
Yeah. So me selling my martial arts business, I do believe that God and the universe has a way of guiding you through this journey. And my friend has a saying. He says, in life, Sam, a lot of times you get usually, you make a decision, you get exactly what you want, or you get the lesson you need, is what he says. And a lot of times in my life, I have not gotten exactly what I wanted. I've gotten the lesson I needed. And so this was kind of one of those moments where I was building a martial arts business. And frankly, I thought I was going to be in it for the rest of my life. And my CEO, I was fairly removed from the business. I was really proud of that fact. It was doing well. It always could have done better, but it was doing well. And my CEO started on some drugs that really messed with him. This was the guy that I built the company with. And it was also my best friend and my brother. And so I had to let him go, and a bunch of emotions ensued. And it was hard. And I stepped back in to take his job, and I realized I don't want to be doing this without the guy I built this with. And I just said, let me go to all the school operators that we had at the time, and let me just see if they were willing to buy it. So I ended up, not selling it as one company. I sold it as an individual piece to the people who I thought would be the most interested in buying their individual school, the operators of the schools themselves. And it was an eye-opening moment because it was a good exit. It was all in. It was probably, it was right up, there was 7 figures involved if I put all the pieces together. But the challenge with it was, I had spent 15 years building this business, and it was a cash flow business, but I didn't really have a lot. It wasn't really worth a lot in a sale as much as I would have wanted it to be. And when I compared that to just a few of my properties that had appreciated over the last 4 or 5 years, I thought, holy cow, I spent 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm grateful for it because that was the cash flow that I used to invest in real estate. But from a saleable thing, oh my gosh, like the appreciation made me millions, multiple 7 figures, and this had made me 7 figures, right? And so it was just a really interesting kind of aha of like, wow, I want to be in assets that are resellable at a big, exit. And I didn't have necessarily that. And I think a lot of smaller businesses maybe think they can sell for more than they can. And I think that's something that everybody should look into. So I exited that. I redeployed the capital into co-living and the business that we're building now. And the biggest thing I'm working on right now, man, is I want to coach people to financial freedom through this model, and I want to help them with the nuances of this model. It is not easy. There's a lot of little details. There's different regulations. There's all kinds of things to watch out for. Different markets that are good. There's different markets that are bad. But I, if I were to look at where I would like to be or where I see myself in 5 years, I want to be the co-living coach, the co-living guy. And helping people get into this model, do it correctly, do it in a profitable way, and avoid a lot of the pitfalls that can cost tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So that's really my goal. That's what I'm working on. We are working on some ground up construction projects. We do have a property management company that I'm building with a partner. But ultimately coaching is where I want to be and where I see myself being for the next 5 to 10 years.
Sam, as you coach people, what do you think the biggest like hang up is? Is it self-limiting beliefs? Is it like, where's the bottleneck? Like, I can just I can see how you'd be a really good coach, by the way, just having this hour conversation with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be so fun to be a student of yours. But what's the hang up with most people?
Yeah. And I bring a lot of that. I used to teach 4, 5, and 6-year-olds in martial arts. And if you don't have energy and dynamicness, then they don't pay attention to you. So I bring a lot of my experience from coaching martial artists and national champions and world champion martial artists. into the real estate world. So it is a little interesting combination. I feel like a lot of real estate guys don't have that experience in coaching, right? They're real estate guys, and that's great and that's amazing. But I bring a little uniqueness, I think, to the coaching space in real estate. But I say all that to say, yeah, the hang up, man, I think it's different with every person, to be honest. Obviously, I think there's limiting beliefs and people are scared, and there's a lot of just misconceptions about all tenants destroy real estate. And but I would say that the biggest thing that overcomes all of that is just hunger. I don't like you could have a million limiting beliefs, a million fears, a million whatevers. Your dad could have failed in real estate, your mom could have failed in real estate, you could have had no money growing up. But if you have hunger, you're truly hunger for, as you guys call that, R1, you see a vision of yourself retired with freedom, with cash coming in each month, and you get excited about that, then you can overcome all of that. And so if someone had a hang up, I would say you got to go work on your hunger. And that could be as simple as just getting around guys like you, Mitchell, that are just doing it, you and Gabe and your co-host Gabe, and you're doing it at a higher level, and be like, holy cow, like Gabe is taking, $15,000 vacations to the Virgin Islands, and he's renting out a whole freaking island. Like, I thought my life was good, but look what he's doing, and, or what I'm just using that as an example. But like, if you get around a place where people are financially free, because my guess is you're not hungry because the people that you go hang out with right now, they're cool with their life and they're working their jobs or they're working their businesses and they're okay getting by. But until you have a little bit of disgust, not meanness, not anger towards those people, they're beautiful people, but until you have a little bit of like, my life can be better than that, and you go find those people that are like that, you don't really get that hunger, And so maybe for you, it's fasting. I know fasting is like more of a spiritual ritual. It's something my wife and I do. We're doing a little fast right now. But like maybe it's, we just sent our dog off for dog training. And one of the things that they have a euphemism for it. It's called food pressure. If the dog is not doing what they want them to do, they starve the dang dog until like the treats work. And I'm exaggerating for purposes of this podcast, but like, that's kind of what they do. They call it food pressure. So maybe you have to get into a place where you remove yourself, you take away some, and you get into a place where you're like, let me evaluate my life. So maybe that is like literally a ritual of fasting or something crazy like that. I know that's kind of a crazy suggestion, but I'm actually throwing it out there as a suggestion where you get hungry. And I'm really thinking more like you evaluate, you use that time, not just to get physically hungry, but to get hungry for a better life. And that is what has made Americans for centuries, is that we're hungry for better. We don't accept the status quo. So if you find yourself getting in that like, it's cool, I'm good, it's okay, then like you gotta kind of mess with that a little bit in your own mind. And so, man, that's my suggestion. And that's what I see as the biggest hang up. Because I got people in my course that are frankly not that skilled, but have achieved amazing results just because they're dang hungry and they're like, I will make this work. I invested in your course, Sam. That money is not going to go to waste. I'm doing this no matter what. And they find a way. It's crazy. And I'm like, well, they weren't the person I thought was going to succeed. They weren't the smartest person that enrolled in my program. They weren't but they did because they had the drive.
I love that. And so this resonates with me so big because I was talking with the elites the other day where I'm reading Think and Grow Rich, again, because I've read it like 3 or 4 times. And then I'm watching The Men Who Built America, which is really cool. They follow like Carnegie and Rockefeller and Ford and JP Morgan, all these guys that had these huge success and really like built a lot of the infrastructure of our country. But like what I realize is it's like whether it's the book, which was based on, I think Carnegie like influenced Napoleon Hill or one of those guys, but whether it's the book or like this TV series, like Desire's the thing. It literally is the thing. It is the burning.
Yeah.
Like without that, like you can have all the knowledge, you can have the connections, the money, all the stuff, but like, it's like the fuel. So like the fact that you said that, I'm like, that's, I don't know. I see a lot of people as really soft and really like, there's no passion. There's no like drive. And then you see these people that, like you said, like maybe don't have all the skills in the world or don't speak the language or whatever, but like you see that drive, the desire in them. And like I want to buy stock in those people, the people that like are different in that way. So anyway, that really, really resonates with me. So Sam, I got a couple questions and then I've got a final question for you before we kind of wrap this up. One question from the audience. What are your suggestions for finding good tenants?
It's not unlike finding a good tenant for anything you would rent, right? I mean, if you're going to rent your car out on Turo, you need a good person. I know that the platform does a lot of that for you, I guess. And maybe that's a bad analogy, but like anything you're renting out, it's the same process, right? So you're going to want to do a background check. You're going to want to make sure you're going to want to verify income. You're going to want to get references if you want to go that far as to say, hey, I need a reference or two. And you're going to do an eviction check, the whole 9 yards. And then what we do is we add on a few steps to that because it's co-living. We're going to do an in-person interview, with them. We're going to meet them at the house. We're going to do a little bit more probably in-person stuff than maybe someone else might do, just to make sure that we get a good vibe. We call it a vibe check. Are they clean? Are they going to be a good fit for the home? And that's kind of what we do to kick this off. So and you're going to want to post on all the platforms, Heidi. You're going to want to post on, you can post for a room for rent on Zillow, on Hot Pads, on Craigslist still works, believe it or not. Facebook Marketplace is a really good place for leads. There's all these other sites like Roomies and Roomster and Searchru and all these other places where you can list your room for rent and get people in there. PadSplit's a platform now you can list and get people coming in and using your home. So I think that's another option as well. So hopefully that gives you at least some context to that question.
Awesome. And then from Jeff, we've got, are markets like North Carolina, Florida, or Texas saturated for co-living? Any other markets that you'd suggest?
These markets are not anywhere close to saturated, right? I think that there is, if you look at how many units, like let's just say Atlanta might be a good example of like Atlanta. I know that's not one of the markets Jeff mentioned, but Atlanta has thousands and thousands of co-living units in it. But the truth is, there's still way more people that need housing. I mean, by all accounts, we're 7.3 million affordable housing units short in the United States. And there will be probably a little bit of like, this is a newer model at scale. So like, yes, there's going to be more units and then people find out about it. And now there's another run on it, and then more units and then more people find out about it. And then of course, with obviously like that, the gap, the wealth gap getting greater. So, but no, I've not. I mean, I coach people in almost every market in the United States, every major market in the United States. We have a lot of data on those different markets and I understand what's happening, but we're not finding any market is saturated, right? Unless you're in a really rural market, you're kind of outside of but if you're in an MSA of a city, you're good. And I like those markets. I mean, I'm in North Carolina almost exclusively with my personal properties. Florida is good. A lot of areas of Florida are really good. Texas is great. But no, I don't think there's any markets that are saturated. I mean, if you just look at the data on, how many people make less than $50,000 a year and how many options for housing there are. And it's insanely off. So we are truly in what I would call a blue ocean. And as more people find out about this and get associated with this model, there's going to be even more demand.
I think you're right. And I don't know that the supply is going to keep up with the demand. I just feel like the tide's with you on this thing, so that's really interesting. So Sam, we're at the top of the hour. We have one question we always ask. We ask every single podcast guest, and lucky for you, the last 2 calls, we made it even harder. Okay. So, and I'll explain that for a second, but the question is a hypothetical. Okay. So hypothetical, you don't have $1 to your name. All right. You're sleeping on a buddy's couch and you do not have, we took away the network. You have no network, no connections, but you want to scale in real estate. You want to be financially free. What does that first month or 2 look like for you? What actions are you taking? How are you going to go do this?
Yeah, I go get a job offer, like just an offer. I don't even need to have the job because you can actually get a primary residence loan now with an offer, with a job offer. So I go get a job offer for a good deal. I convince somebody to give that to me. And then I go buy a house and I'll live in it. I'll get off my buddy's couch. I'd live in it. I'd take one of the rooms. I'd take the smallest room. I used to take the biggest room, but in this particular hypothetical, I'd take the smallest room and I'd rent out the other rooms. And that would cover the mortgage. Whether I decided to take that job or not, maybe legally I would need to take it for a while. I don't know, but take the job or whatever. I'd get that loan. I would go ahead and I'd probably try to buy in an area that I could get a 0% down. So I'd probably buy USDA right now has 0% down loans. It's in the right area, as long as it's obviously primary residence. Or I'd find a buddy. I'd build a relationship with someone that was in the military, and I'd be like, hey, let's go halvesies. I don't have any money, but if you get the loan at 0% down, I'll manage it. I will fill it with people, and let's just split everything 50-50. I would do something like that for a 0% down primary residence loan. There's other options with other programs out there that I could do. And yeah, I would do that. And I would just try to repeat that, as much as I could personally, while probably raising capital at the same time and just proving to people that I could manage these properties first. Because the truth is, if I could prove to investors that I can fill these homes, take care of them, then the rest is gold. I know I'll get as much money as I want because I know they're going to produce. They're hitting the 1% rule, the 1.5% rule, the 2% rule, and any investor worth their salt, I would be willing to invest in that as long as they had a good operator. And I'd be a damn good operator. I'd be the best operator. You'd be partnering with me on every deal I'd bring to you, because I would fill those homes. I'd make sure those tenants were awesome and amazing and go from there. So yeah. And then I'd come to guys like you, Mitchell, and ask for some money to go buy a few more. I'd pick one area though. I wouldn't try to go in a bunch of areas. I'd pick one city. I'd just buy as many co-living homes in that city as possible.
So I love this answer. And we talk about how an opportunity, it's a deal, it's operations, it's capital. And if you can do one or two of those things really, really well, you can attract the other one. And so like you just said, you'd be like, I'm going to find the deals. I'm going to operate them really well, and therefore I'll attract the capital. And that's why you'd be retired again within a year or two, probably maybe less. I don't know. I mean, so because you already have the model, you have the experience. So, man, this was such a fun interview. So fun to get to know you, get to know your story. I feel like I want to have you back, by the way, because I want to talk even more about your coaching. Anyway, I feel like an hour is not enough with you, because there's just so much. It's just been so fun. So thanks, Sam. Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it, Mitchell. Thanks, brother.